I'm stuck on an island with my stupid brother. Hi, everyone. My name is Gary. I had a great life because everything was always smooth money, girls. I was happy with myself and was lucky in everything. That wasn't until my cousin Easy came to visit. You have no idea what he's like, and oddly enough, he's always got me in trouble. He's just a magnet for them to come to me, and all because he's stupid. First, I'll tell you about my life before he came into my life. I grew up in a rich family. My parents were big businessmen, so I got everything I wanted from life. Since at school, in addition to recognition, popularity, and appearance, I also had a lot of friends, as well as attention from girls. I considered myself a happy person. Every day I planned from the evening. Oh, yes. I don't hide the fact that I was literally torn apart. First school, then football training, then a meeting with the girls, with the first, then the second. I didn't always remember their names, I just had to get my time. That was enough for me, too. Well, one day, my mother came up to me in the morning. Come home today right after class. We have guests coming, she said. They were all relatives, my mother's sister and her son. His name is Easy, and I wasn't happy to see him because he was such an idiot. Easy, though, too, like me, grew up in a well to do family. He did not get a kick out of life, didn't know how to make friends. All he had was a lot of trouble, bad eyesight, and dirty hair. I have no idea why he lived like this, but I wasn't going to interfere. I had enough to worry about. My mother warned me to be polite, so I forced a smile and said a short, okay. I didn't want to come home after school, but I gave my word to my mother. I saw the car at the door, which meant we already had them. As soon as I entered the house, I tripped over the suitcases and bags. Brother! I yelled, a nasty, squeaky voice. My nerd brother was running towards me, wearing horribly gaudy glasses, and he threw his arms wide and ran into me, knocking me down. We fell right on top of his suitcases. Get off me! I shouted, and then my mother came over. Be friendly. He missed you, she said. I gave him a disgusted hug, then shoved him away as soon as Mom turned away. It wasn't much of a dinner, and I was bored to death. All the time, he and my aunt were talking incessantly, and I was picking at the steaks with my fork. Easy was looking at the tablecloth and saying that it was wonderful. I rolled my eyes and said I wanted to rest, but my mother told me to take Easy with me. Damn it. This idiot stumbled into my room, and ahead of me, lay down on the bed with a run. He began to chatter incessantly that it was good to study, that he had a couple of rats and was watching them. I was so bored. I told him to shut up, arched into a chair, and fell asleep. The next day, my mother woke me up early in the morning. I was angry because I wanted to sleep on the weekend, but my mother told me to pack my things. We were supposed to spend the weekend on our family island. I packed up, got dressed, and as soon as I got downstairs, Easy was there. Good morning, brother, he said to me, smiling broadly, and I waved my hand and poured myself a cup of coffee. I won't tell you about the road because my head almost exploded from my brother's company. He talked about rats and school all the time, and my mother was busy talking to my sister. A few hours later, we were there. The first day we talked a lot, took pictures. I wanted to be alone, but Easy followed me everywhere. The same evening, I went out to the sea before going to bed, thinking of swimming alone. The water was just gorgeous. As soon as I entered the water, I heard, Brother, I'll be right there, behind me, and Easy was standing in the swimming trunks and going into the water. I rolled my eyes and swam on, and he was yelling something behind me. It wasn't until a couple minutes later, when I looked around, that I noticed he wasn't there. My heart sank, and I shouted at him, but he was silent. Then I realized that he had drowned. I went in search of him, searched for him, and found him. I managed to pull him out of the water, his head on my shoulder, but he wasn't breathing. Someone's raft floated by, apparently untied. I quickly threw him in there and somehow climbed in myself, and then I started doing artificial respiration. At some point, I thought that this was the end. I was really scared. Easy, easy, I shouted while doing a heart massage. And after a moment, he opened his eyes and started coughing. I felt relieved. I can't swim, he said suddenly. And I was so angry. Then why did you get in the water? I yelled, and he told me that he wanted to stand next to me. Are you stupid at all? As soon as I looked back, I realized that while I was rescuing my brainless cousin, the raft had drifted away from the shore. I was disoriented and didn't know where the water was taking us. I was really scared. I started shouting and calling for help, but in the middle of the night, there was no one. The first thought that we might be devoured by sea animals during the night was simply terrifying. I roughly looked in which direction the land was and made my brother steer the raft in that direction. After a while, there was no strength left. Then Easy and I got on the raft and I yelled at him with the last of my strength. He began to cry so hard that I felt sorry for him. You always do that. You're always ruining everything. Why are you climbing up to me? I shouted. But Easy just cried, and then he said he loved me. What do you mean? I asked more calmly. He told me that he knows perfectly well how clumsy he is, knows that he's causing trouble, but I'm an example to him, like an older brother. Ever since my father died, I couldn't believe it, and you're the yard. You put your arms around me and promised me that you would protect me, always. I thank you for that, he said, and I suddenly remembered that moment, and the promise I had safely forgotten. I was suddenly so ashamed. I told him to calm down, and then I promised that everything would be fine. Easy thought we were stuck in the sea forever, but by then it was time for the tour, and I was able to make out the area. It's a good thing that we weren't attacked, and yet the water itself led us to the shore. Easy was already asleep, and I was trying to row as hard as I could. And finally, we came to Earth. By this time, the search team was working. Our moms were looking for us all night, and when they saw it, they were very happy. After Easy and I had slept and eaten, I invited him to sit near the house in the evening, fry sausages on the fire, and chat. He didn't even believe it. We talked a lot, and I thought it was stupid, but it was important for my brother. And that evening, I learned a lot of interesting things about him, such as that he builds a car himself and even built a small computer. I promised to help him with the car and make it beautiful, and Easy was happy. For some reason, I wanted to fulfill my promise and become a real brother to him. Do you think it'll work?
My name is Anna. I want to tell you a story about my crazy half-brother, Tom. More specifically, how he tried to get me out of the house. To begin with, I didn't find out about Tom's existence very long ago. In general, my father and I lived together. My mother and I were divorced a long time ago, and I don't even remember her. Dad worked and I went to school just like everyone else. But one day, people I didn't know came to our house. I didn't understand what it was at first. A woman with a teenage boy asked me to call my father. I immediately noticed that something was wrong with the kid. He kept looking at me from under his brows. You'd think he hated me, but why would he? We don't even know each other, I thought, and I was wrong. It turned out that this was my half-brother. This woman next to him, his mother. We share a father. Naturally, we were both taken aback by this news. At first, Dad didn't want to admit this fact. He even pretended that they had the wrong address. But the woman was persistent. It was simple. Dad had an affair a long time ago with a certain person, and that woman, when she got pregnant, didn't tell her father about it because he was missing. My father doubted if this was his son, but then he looked at the boy and the questions were settled. He was an exact copy of my late grandfather. Apart from the similarities in appearance with the same hateful look, a little withdrawn, unsociable, taciturn. These two did not think long and stayed temporarily to live with us. Oh, I didn't say. That woman demanded a large sum of money from father for the maintenance of her son. Otherwise, she promised to hire a lawyer and resolve the issue according to the law. Well, while Dad was looking for money, they decided to stay with us. It was the longest 3 weeks of my life. Not only did Miss Holt, Tom's mother, make a mess of the house, but her son continued to stare at me like a killer. At first, I had no idea what this guy was up to. But one morning when I woke up, I saw a note on my dresser in my room. It said, "You're not welcome in the house." I can't say that I was scared, but it was unpleasant, and I knew that Tom was. I crumpled the paper in my fist, stormed into his room, and threw it in his face. I yelled at him, told him it was my house, and let him remember it. At this moment, Miss Holt came in. She saw her son lying awake in bed, and I was yelling at him. Of course, she got it all wrong and threatened me. "If you touch him again, you'll have to deal with me," she told me. Oh, I was beside myself with anger. In the evening, I had a serious conversation with my father. He said that he was sorry about all this, but asked me to be patient for him and my mother. Then he promised to get my mother back, no matter what it took. But first I had to get the money for these two. I gathered my will and decided to be more restrained. The next day, when I got back from school, Tom was sitting in the kitchen having lunch. His mother was hanging around again. My half-brother was in his favorite position, staring at me from the corner of the table. I pretended not to notice him and sat down to eat. Suddenly, the phone rang. When I answered the phone, I went back to my seat and saw dead flies on my plate. I glared at Tom, and he just sat there and didn't even blink. Remembering my promise, I silently threw my lunch in the trash and went to my room. There was a fire burning inside me. I wanted to throw that plate in his face. And so it was every day. Tom was always coming up with something. He would throw my neighbor's dog's feces under the bathroom door, turn off the light in the toilet, and once even cut up my favorite sweatshirt. I held on, but with the last of my strength. I wasn't ready to give up and give him my seat. This was my home and my family, and I was determined to stand up to the end. About 2 weeks later, the little bastard had outperformed all his crazy antics. I once passed by his room. He was just not at home. And there I found a photo from my photo album. Everywhere on my face, eyes are cut out. My mouth, my face is baked with a pen. It was a nightmare. I went to deal with Miss Hold, but she wasn't there either. I know it's not good to go through other people's things, but in her purse, I found medical reports that Tom is suffering from a mental disorder. He's paranoid. That's why he's so unsociable and tried to hurt me in every way. He's just not healthy, I thought. I told my father, and he spoke to Miss Hold. It turns out that she was looking for money for her son's treatment. He is always afraid that he will be left alone, and therefore behaves like this. I know he's made trouble for Anna, but that's only because he thinks she's superior to him in everything. He's afraid I'll leave him and take her with me. It's my fault that he's like this. Miss Hold said to her father and began to cry. I overheard the conversation and felt sorry for him. My father said that if possible, he would help as much as he could. After all, this is my son too, even though you hid this fact, he said. Dad was very worried about the upcoming conversation with me. He knew how hard the house had been for me lately. He asked me several times to forgive him for what happened, for the fact that I had to pay for his irresponsibility in my youth. Yes, I don't dispute it. I didn't like that everything in our house had changed and that we now had strangers living with us. But when I found out that Tom needed serious treatment, I felt sorry for him. At the same time, I saw how kind my father was. In general, the four of us have been living together ever since. Dad was actively involved in Tony's treatment. We didn't get along very well, but at least he stopped looking at me like a killer. And Miss Hold wasn't such a bitch.